because we're not making more and the demand's going up. And the demand's particularly high for those high volume cuts. Why? More consumers with more money, and there's not going to be a change in the amount of beef. Steaks will be eaten by the richest people in the world, and where do those people live? You probably figured that out by now. The rich people that eat the best protein predominantly are going to be inside that circle. China passed Japan as the #2 economy in the world in August of 2010. This is a stat that I love. In 2009, there were 3 million millionaires in the United States. I don't know how many there were in Canada. I don't have that statistic. I apologize. But there were 3 million in the States. There were 185,000 in India and 600,000 in China. So by far, the rich people are in our country, not in those countries. The difference is that our percentage annual increase in those 3 million people is about 0. Those people that have that wealth are getting wealthier, but their numbers are not increasing. And the rate of increase in China and India is estimated to be around 20% per year. Now, if you grow those two little numbers at 20% per year and you roll it out to 2020, there's 20 million people over 3 million in those countries. Now, that growth's probably going to slow, but you can see what's going to happen, okay? What are those people in those countries, those 6 million millionaires, what are they going to eat? Anything they want, right? I mean, because food, when you have the wealth, the food becomes a relatively immaterial portion of your annual budget. So you can eat anything you want. They're going to eat the same percentage of rice and grains as they eat right now? No, they're going to eat more protein. And that's going to pass on right down through their economy. And so this demand is coming, and it's going to stress the ability to produce protein. In 2020, most of the richest people in the world will live inside that circle. Put that up there again, because that's the graphic. More cows. You know, I'm a beef producer. I realize that many of you are not beef producers in the room, but I think it has ramifications for the pork market. It has ramifications for lamb. Are we going to have more cows? Our Cattle Facts estimates that global cattle production in terms of number of cattle is down 6% over the last decade. In the late 90s, when I went down to Brazil and Australia, you could run a cow on about $1,200 worth of land. If you go to those countries today, you can't get that land for less than $4,000. The last best place, the last cheapest place left, as far as I can tell, I haven't been to Russia, okay? Some of you may have been to Russia and know all about Russia. I don't. Paraguay is the last cheapest place in South America, okay? In 2005, you could go to Paraguay, and if you went and bought a piece of forest that you would clean, you could buy the land for about $50 a hectare. You have to clear one and keep one in the woods, so you really need 2 hectares to run a cow, and you had the cost of clearing it, which was about $200 a hectare back then. So for about $300, you could have enough land for a cow. Okay? That was the last best place. A friend of mine went down there and bought a big ranch. Today, it is worth 10 times what he paid for it. Okay? The land, you can't, even if you go by rough forest that's uncleared right now, you're still north of $2,000 a cow in Paraguay, which is the last place in South America. Okay? There's no more cheap land. Okay? $4,000 in Australia and Brazil. I asked Brian Pogue on the ride over here this morning, I said, what's it cost? He started talking about per acre. I said, it's $6,000 to $10,000 per cow. He said, well, yeah. It's $6,000 to $10,000 per cow. It's $6,000 to $10,000 per cow in the U.S. How much cash return do we need on cows to put more land into cattle production if land for cows costs $6,000 to $10,000 bucks? 10% return, at least, right? So we got to make $600 to $1,000 a cow. We going to do that? No way. It's not going to happen. Cattle production is not going to increase, and that marginal land, when corn's $6 a bushel, is going to go into crop production, not into cattle production, and cattle numbers are going to decrease. Okay? So the global cattle numbers are going to be stagnant. Okay? It's not going to change. It's just the way it is. They're not making more land. High crop prices will contribute to that. Again, no matter what you net on those cows, you're not going to push those more land back into cattle production. I think global cattle numbers have peaked forever. They're not going to go up. They may shift. We may see fewer in the better agricultural areas and more in some of those more remote areas, but net numbers, we're not going to see a gain. I threw this one in. I think this applies whether you're in cattle or pigs or sheep or any livestock. I think, livestock are happy today. The problem is not the animals, it's the people. The people don't think the animals are happy. Okay? And it's just something we're going to have to live with, and this is a big game changer. And we're not going to win the public relations war. We're not going to educate 300 million people in our country. We're not going to educate globally 7 billion people. And the reality is most of that consuming public is going to be farther and farther away from the production chain. So they're not going to understand what we're doing. And the only way they can relate to us and our livestock is by the way they think about relating to the animals that live in their house with them. Now think about that, because that's the only animal they relate to. They don't relate to livestock, they relate to their pets. And their expectation is going to be that we treat our livestock more and more like they treat their pets. And that's a reality. And that's not going to change. There's no amount of money we're going to throw at it that's going to change that. We're going to have to treat our animals more and more like pets. There's a supermarket chain in the United States that in its beef supply chain management requires that each animal fed in a feedlot have 200 square feet of grassy land to rest on. Whole Foods, yep, that's their requirement. And people are out there remodeling pens to build it so they can supply them. Okay, it's just a sign of the times. Times are changing. We have to adjust to those times. We're not going to be able to ebb that tide or change that flow or alter that direction. Number 7, because demand's going to be high and prices are going to be high and cattle numbers are not going to go up, obviously there will be a shift in the number of pigs and the number of chickens, okay, because beef will not keep up. We will see beef lose per capita market share, and that market share will be taken up by pork and poultry because obviously they can ramp up inventory when we cannot. We will utilize technology to maximize the amount of production we get per head. That's going to happen in all livestock. That's the way it's going to go. We are going to farm more intensively. Okay? I don't even rule out the fact that somewhere down the road we might even move to confinement cows. Okay? That's against the last one, the happy cows deal. Okay? If it wasn't for that, I would tell you somewhere down the line, even with $6 corn, we'll probably start to confine cows because the market will try to pull it through. But for sure, the market will say, take the number of cows you have today and crank more beef out of them. Okay? Zilmax and Optiflex, I don't know what the adoption level is. We had a presentation in our beef meeting that was looking at the feasibility or infeasibility of doing that. The most rational, I'll be careful how I say that. Feedlot operators in the United States tend to be fairly rational, okay? They will spend $1 to make $2, okay? Their adoption level of Zilmax and Optiflex, which are beta agonists, is somewhere around 70%. You have feedlots that feed 1 million head a year that are investing $40 per head in putting this stuff into their beef cattle, and I guarantee you they're getting a return from it because you're not going to convince me they're spending $40 million blind. They're just not doing it, okay? This stuff increases the production we get out the other end, and we're going to see people use that. We're going to need to expand the use of terminal sires. If you look at pork and poultry production, they use terminal sires, much less so in sheep and beef cattle. That has to change. These terminal sires will allow us to get more production out of the same number of females, and we'll have to move towards that. So we'll try to produce more meat per head. That trend's been ongoing, and I think it will continue, if not accelerate. Value signals are changing. Why? For several reasons. As we look ahead, the value signals that have historically plagued our industries because we don't get the value signal from the consumer back to the producer. It'll happen, number one, because the technology allows us to do it. Number two, the competing products will make it mandatory for us. You're way ahead of us here in Canada on your traceability. I mean, the United States continues to fight this trend. We don't want to identify, we don't want to track the animals, but we're going to have to do it. It's just the reality.